more about you, Alicia. I paid good money for the intel I got on you. And it was worth every.
She spent 20 years building the most carefully protected image in the music industry. 16 Grammys, 90 million records sold, a reputation so clean it was almost suspicious. So why, at 44, is Alicia Keys' name showing up in conversations about industry manipulation, alleged backdoor deals, and two of the most powerful men in music history? That's the question nobody in this industry seems to want answered out loud. Let's start at the very beginning, because none of this makes sense without understanding where Alicia Keys actually came from. She was born Alicia Augello Cook on January 25, 1981, in Hell's Kitchen, Manhattan. If you know anything about Hell's Kitchen in the early 80s, you already know the odds were stacked against her before she could even walk. Her father, Craig Cook, an African-American flight attendant, and her mother, Teresa Augello, a paralegal and part-time actress, separated when Alicia was just 2 years old. That left her and her mother crammed into a single-room apartment at Manhattan Plaza, a subsidized housing complex on the West Side. And here's the thing people always overlook. That environment, that instability, that chaos, it didn't break her, it forged her. At 7 years old, Alicia started piano lessons, not because she begged for them, but because her mother insisted. Yeah, Teresa understood something early. Structure and art could be the difference between survival and destruction for a girl growing up in that zip code. And Alicia took to it like she'd been playing her whole life. Her teachers were stunned. By the time most kids were still learning scales, she was tearing through Beethoven, Chopin, and Mozart with a precision that didn't belong to a child. Music became the one place she felt completely safe, completely in control. But then something shifted at 12. Classical training wasn't enough anymore. She started blending everything. The jazz her mother played around the house, the soul bleeding through the walls of Manhattan Plaza, the R&B that was taking over New York radio, and she started writing her own compositions. Original music. At 12 years old, she enrolled at the Professional Performing Arts School in Manhattan, studying vocal music and theater, and if you think the story slows down here, it doesn't. She graduated valedictorian at 16. She was accepted to Columbia University. She had already been discovered by a manager at 15 who got her signed to a major label, making her one of the youngest artists in the country to land a major deal.
Please welcome the incredibly special Alicia Keys.
Hi.
Can you describe how JayZ approached you?
Columbia Records. That's the part of this story that most retrospectives skip over too quickly. And that's a mistake, because what happened at Columbia is the foundation of everything that came after. When Alicia signed with Columbia in 1994 at just 15 years old, she believed she was stepping into her future. Columbia had the resources, the connections, the prestige. On paper, it was everything. But the reality behind those doors was something else entirely. Almost immediately, the label began pushing her to become something she wasn't. They wanted her hair blown out and flowing. They wanted short dresses, a slimmer frame, a more commercial, more easily digestible image. Executives reportedly told her she needed to look and sound like everyone else. And here's the part that should make your jaw drop. They dismissed her own compositions. They brought in outside writers and producers, handed her material written by people who had never met her and didn't understand what made her unique in the first place. She later recalled driving to the studio with dread sitting in her chest like a stone. And that's where it gets messy, because this wasn't a short phase. And this went on for 4 years. From ages 15 to 19, Alicia Keys and Columbia Records were in a quiet, grinding war. She refused to record songs she didn't believe in. She refused to be remade into a generic pop product. And Columbia, rather than recognize what they had, let her walk. She was dropped in 1998. For most artists, that moment would have been the end. For Alicia, it turned out to be the door. But not before Clive Davis walked through it first. Clive Davis had already built legends, Whitney Houston, Aretha Franklin, Janis Joplin. When he launched J Records after being forced out of Arista, he was already one of the most powerful executives in the history of recorded music. And when he found Alicia Keys, 19 years old and freshly dropped by Columbia, he reportedly saw exactly what the last label had missed entirely.
I'm here to honor one of the greatest that's ever done it. And I'm also here because before anything else, I was a true fan of your music.
That changed everything. Davis gave her something Columbia had refused to offer: creative freedom. She could write her own songs, produce her own material, present herself on her own terms, braids and all, piano front and center, no manufactured persona required. She poured herself into the debut record, processing everything: the abandonment, the survival, the love, the self-doubt, and poured it directly into the music. But here's where you have to slow down and pay attention, because the word freedom is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Was it actually freedom? Or was it just a different kind of control, one that felt so much better than Columbia's version that she couldn't tell the difference? Keep that question in the back of your mind, because we're coming back to it. In 2009, JayZ dropped what many people consider the defining New York anthem of that entire decade. But what almost nobody knows is that Alicia Keys was not the original plan for that record. The songwriters, Angela Hunte and Janet Sewell-Ulepik, had crafted that hook with a completely different vocalist in mind. And according to industry sources, Mary J. Blige was JayZ's actual first choice. She reportedly performed an early version of it live before the final version ever existed. So how did Alicia end up on one of the biggest songs in JayZ's catalog? JayZ pivoted. He made the call. But even that didn't go smoothly, and Alicia said so herself years later. The song went 9 times platinum, 2 Grammy wins, all performed at the World Series, the VMAs. It became the soundtrack of an entire city. But underneath all of that success, something else was building. Whispers started circulating in industry circles that Alicia's placement on that record wasn't a purely musical decision. According to some insiders, the growing personal bond between Alicia and JayZ was a factor. She was not a Roc Nation artist. She had no formal business relationship with JayZ. But somehow she was now tied to him forever through one of the most iconic songs in his catalog. And that timing, right at the peak of her mainstream explosion, was not lost on people who had been watching the industry closely. Here's the part people miss, though. At that exact same moment, Alicia was still under the direct guidance and influence of Clive Davis, the same man who had signed her, shaped her debut, and was known throughout the industry for managing every single detail of his artist's public image. So you had JayZ on one side, Clive Davis on the other, and Alicia Keys sitting at the center of both of their orbits. And that's exactly the setup that Jaguar Wright walked into when she went public with her allegations. Jaguar Wright did not ease into it. According to Wright's public statements, which have not been proven in court and which Keys has not directly addressed on record, Wright alleged that Alicia had a pattern of getting involved with men who were already in committed relationships and causing significant damage in the process. Wright also alleged that Clive Davis was not a passive figure in Alicia's career decisions, but that Davis allegedly pressured and positioned Alicia in ways that served his own broader industry interests, including allegedly using her as a tool against other artists who reportedly found themselves quietly blackballed while Alicia's career continued to ascend. Wright also alleged, and again this has not been proven in court, that Alicia's carefully maintained public image of authenticity and empowerment was a constructed persona that masked a very different private reality. None of these allegations have been substantiated or confirmed, and Alicia Keys has not responded to them directly. But the specific nature of the accusations and the way they aligned with patterns people had already noticed independently, that's what kept the conversation alive long after it should have faded. Because here's the truth about Clive Davis that most people don't want to sit with. What Alicia described as support, others in the industry have consistently described as control. She was 19 when she signed with J Records. 19. And Davis reportedly delayed her original debut album. It had it re-recorded, repackaged, and repositioned to fit the lane he believed would sell. Her image, the braids, the modest clothes, the piano, the empowerment lyrics, it was cohesive to a degree that raised eyebrows among people who knew how messy and unpredictable organic artistic identity usually is. She wasn't raw like Lauryn Hill. She wasn't provocative like Lil' Kim. She wasn't flashy like Beyoncé. She was calm, respectable, and untouchable. And according to multiple people who observed her career from the inside, that wasn't by accident. Some artists from the J Records era reportedly complained that Davis played favorites aggressively, pouring resources into Alicia while shelving others who had comparable or greater talent. And when Jaguar Wright's allegations later added a layer of deliberate targeting to that picture, those older industry whispers snapped back into focus with uncomfortable clarity. But what's confirmed is this. Clive Davis did not just promote Alicia Keys. He curated her. He managed her rollout like a political campaign. No scandal, no surprises, no public battles with other artists or label executives. Just talent, polish, and media-friendly poise. And critically, she stayed silent through almost everything. No clapbacks, no industry commentary, no public position on the state of black female artists in the music business. And some industry observers have suggested that silence was not incidental, that it was, allegedly, part of the strategy. An artist who never challenges the system because the system had already worked in her favor. Whether that's a fair characterization or a cynical reframing of simple professionalism is genuinely debatable. But it's a harder question to dismiss when you look at the specific timing of every major career move she made and whose hand was behind it. By her mid-20s, she was performing at the Grammys, appearing on the covers of every major magazine and hosting global events. And Clive Davis was still right there behind her at every milestone, introducing her at award shows, attaching his name to her achievements, and maintaining a proximity that some observers found interesting, to say the least. Then, 2008 arrived, and Alicia's personal life became the story. Rumors began circulating about a romantic relationship between Alicia and producer Swizz Beatz. The problem was that Swizz Beatz was married at the time. He and singer Mashonda had wed in 2004 and shared a son, Kasim Jr., born in 2006. From the outside, it looked like a functioning hip-hop power couple, but the marriage was apparently fracturing long before Alicia's name entered the picture. Swizz had also reportedly fathered a daughter with British singer Yana Sebastian in 2008, which suggested that the trouble in the marriage predated everything that followed. What's not disputed is this. By 2009, while Swizz was still legally married to Mashonda, he and Alicia were publicly together, photographed at events, clearly serious. In May of 2009, Mashonda took to Twitter and didn't hold back, publicly accusing Alicia Keys of being a homewrecker and contributing directly to the destruction of her family. The backlash was immediate and brutal. For the first time in her career, Alicia Keys faced sustained, loud public hatred. People who had sung along to her songs about empowerment and self-worth were now calling her a hypocrite. The image Davis had spent a decade building was cracking in real time, and for the first time Alicia didn't have a clean answer for the room. She stayed silent. No statement, no press conference, no Instagram post. Swizz Beatz stepped in and denied the most damaging version of the timeline, insisting that he and Mashonda had already been separated when he and Alicia became romantic, and claiming the media had distorted and compressed the actual sequence of events. Alicia later said in interviews that when she first met Swizz years earlier, she hadn't been interested in him at all, describing him as too flashy, too ostentatious for her taste. She said their connection developed slowly and that by the time it became romantic, she genuinely believed his marriage was over. Whether that account reflects the full truth, a partial truth, or a convenient reframing of the timeline? That question has never been fully settled, and it's worth noting that it has never been adjudicated in any court. But then something happened that almost nobody in the original narrative predicted. Despite the public humiliation and the years of anger, Alicia, Swizz, and Mashonda eventually reconciled, not just civilly, genuinely. Swizz's divorce from Mashonda was finalized in 2010, and on July 31st of that same year, Alicia and Swizz married in a private ceremony on the Mediterranean Sea. Their son, Egypt Daoud Dean, was born on October 14, 2010. A second son, Genesis Ali Dean, arrived in December 2014. The blended family grew to include 3 children Swizz brought from previous relationships, and by multiple accounts, Alicia stepped into a co-parenting structure that was deeply unconventional and reportedly deeply functional. Interview. In March 2018, Alicia, Swizz, and Mashonda jointly released a book called Blend: The Secret to Co-Parenting and Creating a Balanced Family. They were photographed vacationing together. Their children were photographed together. And people who had spent years calling Alicia a home wrecker were now praising her for the maturity and courage it took to build something real out of something that had started so painfully. It was, on its face, one of the more remarkable public redemptions in recent entertainment history. But then, 2025 arrived and the internet found a new thread to pull. Rumors surfaced alleging that Swizz Beatz had been unfaithful to Alicia and had allegedly fathered a child outside their marriage. The speculation spread fast, and a particular irony wasn't lost on anyone who remembered the beginning of their story. Both Alicia and Swizz publicly denied the rumors. Swizz called the allegations completely false and emphasized his commitment to his wife and family. Those denials have not been verified or contradicted by any confirmed reporting, and the alleged infidelity has not been proven. But the fact that the shadow of how this relationship started was still being used as a frame 15 years later says something about how long this industry holds its receipts. As of 2025, Alicia Keys is 44 years old. She has sold over 90 million records worldwide. She has won 16 Grammy Awards. She has built a career as not just a singer but a pianist, a songwriter, producer, actress, and Broadway composer. Her influence on R&B is documented and undeniable. She brought classical musicianship back into mainstream R&B at a moment when the genre had largely abandoned live instrumentation. And in doing so, she proved to a generation of artists that audiences would reward technical depth and emotional authenticity when given the chance. She paved a lane that artists like H.E.R. have walked directly through, and she did it largely on her own terms, or at least on terms that she accepted and by most accounts embraced. But here's the question that this entire story keeps circling back to, the one that doesn't have a clean answer and probably never will. When you look at everything, the Columbia Nightmare, the Clive Davis machinery, the JayZ alignment, the Jaguar Wright allegations that have never been proven but have also never been directly refuted. As the Swizz Beatz controversy and everything that came after it, was Alicia Keys the architect of her own story? Or was she, as some industry insiders and certain very vocal critics have alleged, a woman who survived by learning exactly which rooms to be quiet in and which hands to shake? Drop your answer in the comments because I genuinely want to know where you land on this one.